Just as a quick aside, omega obese people should not be allowed to rent apartments above other apartments. It's just nonstop lumbering and it shakes the whole damn building. I live underneath a beluga whale, and I can feel him get out of bed in the morning. I'm laying there waiting for the ceiling to collapse as I hear his bed springs gasp like it's their dying breath. Everyone above 200 pounds should be designated first floor fatties. Stay on ground level where your impact is minimal. On one hand, you'd think him living on the third floor would be good cardio, but on the other hand, he's probably just as massive as he was when he moved in. Got me praying for a zombie apocalypse so he can be one of the first meals for a dozen of them. If you feel bad, don't. I know he's mean too, because I've heard him yell at his girlfriend who comes over once a week, or maybe it's his daughter. She sounds retarded, so the age is hard to pin down, but I've definitely heard her orgasm through the ceiling, so either possibility isn't great. I don't know, every time I feel the walls rattle or hear random profane shouting, I just wish he'd chase a hot dog off a bridge, and when he's not doing any of that, he just coughs. All day, and I mean hacking up a fucking lung. He gets in from work or wherever he goes and immediately just inhales toxic fumes until his lungs collapse. It's not even just coughing, it's gratuitous gagging. It's like it's on purpose almost. If you have to work this hard to cling to life, just shove off already. That apartment is probably so drenched in viruses and germs it should be condemned and burned. It's actually insulting that someone could be that fat and gross. Your existence is happening to me, and I deserve an apology. I started watching Hoarders recently, and I went in there fully expecting to just make fun of people and be an asshole, and to be fair, I did do some of that, watching a bunch of people shaped like cloves of garlic hire professional organizers like you can't even organize the fat on your body, at least some of it's supposed to go to your tits. Hoarding is a mental disorder in which people hang on to things the general population would consider meaningless, disgusting, or even hazardous, and it's been a trip watching people let the camera crew into their home and give tours of their house all matter-of-factly, like, oh yeah, that's where I keep my rotten pumpkins, and over there is where I've stored all my bowel movements for the last 2 years. One old lady had to call paramedics because she was in one of those motorized wheelchairs and she literally just got stuck in her own fucking house. She couldn't get out because the clutter was too cluttery, and it's been unreal watching some of these people choose their junk over their own families. A guy's daughter will be like, hey, what's more important, me or this home improvement magazine from 2001? And he'll just stare at her like, at least the magazine's always been there for me. Oh yeah, damn, if I knew all I had to do to be a competent family member is collect dust in a corner for 2 decades, I would have put in a lot less effort at home. But even though some of the situations are laughable, the general emotion that pervades my thoughts while watching these episodes is sadness. Watching people break down and realize they have to change, telling their families unspoken things that went unaddressed for so long, it's just a slice of the human condition cake, and you don't expect to be eating your feelings out here. I do laugh every time the end of an episode hypes up the motivation a hoarder has to continue with the cleanup they've been doing. They'll give testimonials like, I'm gonna become stronger for my daughter, my sister, and myself, with emotional music, and then the next scene is a text paragraph of the show being like, Debbie refused further help from an organizer and has been evicted from her apartment. She now lives on the street collecting discarded candy wrappers and eating shit. I watched the whole first season in a day on Hulu, and I am thoroughly enjoying myself. Okay, so new update. I watched a bunch more Hoarders episodes, and I want to talk about some of them specifically. One of them involves this white guy who looks and sounds like every pedophile mighty morphed into one entity. This dude adopted 2 black kids, one of which is a seemingly normal 6-year-old girl, and the other is an 8-year-old retarded boy of comparable age who was born addicted to crack. Like, he would have been the Michael Jordan of South Park's Crack Baby Basketball League, no doubt. And the show said he had a reactive attachment disorder, or RAD, which is ironically not very rad. He was the most violent kid I've ever seen, getting into these fits of throwing anything and everything, hitting people, biting them, like chomping down on them. There's a scene where you can see the kid use his teeth to pull the skin up on his adoptive father's arm like a sheet he was trying to tuck himself into bed with. And I know you're not supposed to say this under any circumstances, even though with proper context nobody should care, but this kid who happens to be black looked exactly like a fucking chimpanzee. I saw the shape of his head and said, is that Diddy Kong? I fully expected him to pull out a gun and shoot peanuts at the cameras and then strap on a jetpack made of barrels and fly away. But I was watching that with Christine, and I looked at her and said, if there's even the tiniest part of you that still wants kids, look at that shit. Because we talked about it several times, and she says she doesn't, as don't I, of course, but you never know what might be harbored in little corners of someone's soul. But anyway, because you might get that as a parent. You might get the kid that just screams randomly and has a meltdown due to sensory overload or having a brain that's bad. The kid you're worried is going to throw a tantrum and beat the hell out of his sister, which is what I was worried about. They had on-camera interactions where they're sitting next to each other and the retarded kid just whacks his sister with a Barbie or something, and then this is how many pedo vibes the father's giving off. When that happens, he reaches down and holds the rad kid's arms and just softly says, "Gentleness, gentleness," like he's talking about how he wants his dick touched. His name's Doug, by the way, so if he didn't sound creepy before, he sure does now. I'm not saying everyone named Doug is a pedophile, I'm just letting you draw your own conclusions based on what I think is relevant info. The moral of the story is, if you have somewhat normal kids, you're so goddamn lucky. Like, oh my god, have you taken a step back and thought about how many mental and physical bullets you dodged that your kid doesn't have a RAD syndrome or leukemia or brittle bone disease? I don't mean to sound ableist here, but if your kid has 2 legs and a functional spine, he's just a better kid. If you've got a little tyke in a wheelchair, aw man, thumbs down, that must be a bummer and a half. Apologies if anyone in a wheelchair is watching this, but like if you had the choice, you'd probably have picked not being in a wheelchair, unless you're on some weird identity cope where it's your whole personality. I'm sure plenty of disabled people are cool dudes and gals, but all the ones who make policing language and decrying jokes their life's work are so fucking annoying, I just have to make you jealous by putting my foot down. But you can rest easy knowing you're stronger than me, because if I got paralyzed from the neck down tomorrow, I'd kill myself. Somehow. Maybe breathe my chair into traffic or hock a loogie over some exposed wiring. Anyway, back to Hoarders. Another episode involved the least successful operation I've seen. The hoarder was a lady in her late 30s or 40s, and she looked purposely ugly. Like, nobody is that ugly naturally. You have to ruin your face and body manually, either with drug use or eating leftover pan grease for decades, and she was married to an equally ugly dude who had one tooth taking up a lot of extra real estate in his mouth. Like, that tooth was double parked. There weren't no room for anyone else up there. If he lost that thing, the tooth fairy would have given him her car. And he was fed up with his wife's shit and threatened to divorce her if she didn't go through with this whole assisted cleanup process. So everyone gets over there, and the process is slow going, because as what commonly happens in these episodes, the hoarder wants to sort through every item individually, and in their defense, of course they do. I wouldn't throw anything out in bulk without reminding myself what's even in the box. The organizer's showing her a big container of a bunch of random stuff like, "Can you please make a decision on this entire thing while only being able to see 10% of what's in it?" Obviously, if it's a collection of broken actual trash, then sure, dump the whole thing, but it might be fair to confirm there's nothing of actual value in there before you start heave-hoeing into the dump truck. But so we get the impression, based on the interactions between her and her husband, that relationship ain't gonna last regardless of how things turn out. She can't bring herself to toss a dirty, piss-stained mattress, but she could sure learn from the way this dude seems hell-bent on throwing away his marriage. You know any passive-aggressive things you might imagine a husband saying to his wife, like, "Oh, wish you had as much enthusiasm for our sex life as you have for those donuts." Well, these interactions were a bit more blunt, like, "All your shit's worthless, throw it all out, fuck you." They were at each other's throats the entire time, and through all of it, her daughter's just there trying to clean up her little brother's room so at least that can be a nice spot in the house, and trying to get her mom to pick up the pace and stay on task, and she gets an earful from her mom the same way, to the point where she spends half the day crying. And at some point, when the wife is off doing something in the house, the husband takes it upon himself to just throw big piles of stuff into the dump truck without getting her approval or checking with anyone. Him and his tooth go rogue and start dumping everything, and she comes out and sees him and freaks the hell out, trying to block stuff. Everything he throws in there, she pulls back out from the truck, and he just goes and dumps something else instead. It's truly exactly what you want to see in a Hoarders episode, just absolute chaos. If she had a gun, she would have shot him dead in the street in front of all the cameras. That's how insanely pissed she was. And in the end, she banished everyone. The cleanup crew, the organizer, the therapist, the cameraman. She was just screaming for them to get the hell out. So they had to. And at the end, the only positive thing they could say in the text update was that at least they cleaned the daughter's little brother's room. They also felt the need to say that the husband and wife split up, but I think even if you watched that episode dubbed in a foreign language, you would have easily deduced that. Anyway, Hoarders is a fun show. You should check it out if you haven't. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. Watch all my other videos because they're rad and retarded, and I'll see you guys next time.